We're here with Michael, the technical director for AT&T Williams, the Formula One team. Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Michael. As technical director for a Formula One team, I don't, here in the United States, people are familiar with Formula One, but I don't think they're, totally aware of how important the technical aspect of Formula One is as opposed to other series. Can you kind of just kind of go over, just for the fans over here in the states, what exactly a technical director is for Formula One? What is your job description?
Well, the main thing you're responsible for is all the R&D, design and operations of the cars. So from a technical point of view, you have people inside the factory that sort out production and getting parts to the track. You have finance guys who bring money in and make sure we spend and don't overspend in the right areas. But from a technical point of view, a technical director is just concerned with making the car reliable and fast. So you basically organize all the people and make sure that you have the right people in the right place, and you make sure your designs are sufficient. You're going, and that you spend money in the right areas, because Formula One is you have big budgets in Formula One, but it's all relative to other Formula One teams. So even if you make a very fast Formula One car, if it's 1 second off the pace, then it's slow. So it doesn't. It's all relative, and working out exactly where to spend your money to get your sort of best return against all your other competitors. That's the job of the technical director, alongside probably another engineering director, another sort of technical people within the company. So you rely on a lot of people around you to help make the decision, but ultimately the TD is responsible for making the final call on the design of the car.
All right. One thing that of the many things that separates F1s from other series is that each team has to make their own car. There's really you don't buy a
Yeah,
car off the shelf. Now,
that's right.
the Williams car for this year, when just to give an idea how long of a process it is, when did you first start going, okay, we're going to build the FW33? When did you first start taking pen to paper, so to
Yeah.
speak, for this chassis?
Well, normally you start aerodynamic work up to 12 months before, depending on how big the rule changes. You'll have a model in the wind tunnel and also a CFD model as well for computer analysis of the airflow. And you start that around 12 months before, and your sort of mechanical side, or your gearbox and driveline, that's about around 9 months before. So you're typically looking now around 12 months, yeah, for a turnaround on a Formula One car. We can make a Formula One car a lot quicker than that. We can turn around and build a car in 2 months if we have to, but it's not going to be a fast one or a reliable one. So there's so many processes and things that are in place now to make sure that you don't mess up, if you like, to make sure everything's strong enough but still light enough. So that design process takes a lot of iterations, because let's say at the start of that design process, you come up with a concept and you say, okay, this is how the car's going to look. And when you've designed that, you then have to go through lots of loops of checks to make sure that you get the most amount of weight out of the car, get the friction down, and make sure you optimize your concept. Formula One's as such that Formula One is a prototype series, as you just correctly said. A lot of other series are production series now. Even open wheeler, there's lots of open wheeler production series these days where to contain cost, everything is allowed to be changed. Well, Formula One's not like that. We never race the same Formula One car twice because of it being in that prototype nature. It's changing every race. So I think in terms of what you look at for an F1 car early on, you look for the big conceptual jumps. But when you make a conceptual change, you're almost certainly going to lose, because the car's so optimized. If you move off your optimum path, you're going to take a hit, but you're taking that hit to assume that you're going to get a bigger gain later on. And that's probably the biggest key to Formula One over the last few years, is to make sure that you choose those routes carefully where you want to go with your concept.
You mentioned the change and development on a Formula One car. When you start the season, you start, you have your design, you build a new car, and then throughout the season, I mean, I try to research and I look up things, how many changes the car goes through every race. The car is different. When
Yeah.
so in a typical season, you start the race with the car. How much of the car has changed usually by the end of the season? I mean, is it pretty much the same, or is it 10, 20, 30%, or if you wouldn't even be able to recognize it?
It's completely different. So probably the only components that really stay the same is the engine, because it's homologated, and the chassis as well, because the chassis is a big part to change. We have done new chassis in season before, but not for a long, long time. So typically the chassis and engine is about the only thing that's going to remain the same. Every single other part is going to change. The wings, the suspension maybe sometimes as well can remain the same, but definitely all the bodywork and wings and the physical things that you see from the outside, that'll be completely different by the last race compared to the first race. It's the nature of the business, it's competitive, and all those little changes, one of them by themselves doesn't make a big difference, but when they all add up, that's where your performance comes from.
Um, we were talking about how Formula One, every team has to make their own car. The only component you guys really don't make, and for most teams they don't make, is the engine. Um, this year
Yeah, that's right.
you guys have not. To be honest, throughout the history of Williams, this hasn't been a stellar season for Williams F1. How much do you think that might be attributed to the fact that you guys are running the Cosworth engine, that is not you're not up there with the power plants like Mercedes and McLaren have or Ferrari does?
Well, when you're if you're perhaps fighting for a championship, those last couple of tenths they definitely matter. You're right about that, but we're not in that position.
Hmm.
So if you're between sort of 7 tenths up to 1.5 seconds off, then you've got to look elsewhere unless you've got a really big problem that would become very obvious. So the Cosworth is not a first order driver for us not being competitive at the moment. There's aspects of it that could always be better, but I'm sure if you took a Renault or a Ferrari engine, you'd find exactly the same thing. You'd find out that there'd be deficiencies on them as well, and Mercedes. So it's always very subjective to look at that. And I guess from a technical director's point of view, you're looking to say, this is what I've got. I've got these drivers, I've got this engine, and I have to make the best out of it. And there's plenty of examples in history where even if you have a weakness in one area, which I'm not saying the Cosworth is, but even if you did have that, you can overcome it through other advantages of that engine. So I don't think our poor season this year is due to Cosworth.
You are okay. You've been with Williams since I believe 2001. That's
Yeah,
really long time for anybody and for one team in Formula One. But it's recently
that's right.
been announced you are leaving Williams F1, and you've been all over the place in the news that you're going to McLaren. Um, I'm sure it must be exciting for you going to McLaren, one of the top teams, one of the most storied names in Formula One. But what's it like, personally, what's it like leaving a team that basically you cut your teeth in Formula One? You started with a couple of smaller teams before, but you're pretty much your career has been Williams.
Yeah, I think I worked for Lotus for a year, then Jordan for 6 years, and
Hmm.
then this is my 11th season with Williams. So I'm very much seen as a Williams person because I've always been here and got a very good relationship with Frank and Patrick. It's a great team to be with, and we had some very successful times early on and through the middle. But the last few years have not been great, but there's lots of different reasons for that. And I think my time here has been fantastic, and it's time for a change, and both for myself and the company. And really, I wish all the guys here the best. But in answer to your question, what's it like to be Williams and then move on? I guess you look at it and say it's a great part of a great chapter of my life, and there's lots of great memories here and good experiences with all the people, and there's a lot of people in Formula One that have done the same thing and have worked for Williams with different levels of success throughout history. So especially the last since Williams has been around.
All right, Mr. Michaels. I want to thank you again. I know you're a very busy man, especially now you got to pack up and head over to Singapore. That must not
That's,
be easy for you guys. Take everything
yeah,
with you. I want to thank you
that's
for.
right. Yeah, most of the stuff's on the way there now.
Well, I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I wish you very much luck in Singapore and for your career in McLaren next year.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
All right, this has been Sam Michaels with AT&T Williams F1. Thank you for being on Oversteer TV.
Yes, thank you.